Walt had a quadruple heart bypass just a short time ago. And we all love Walt. Walt, as you know, writes the column in the Wall Street Journal that's better read than any other column in the Wall Street Journal. I talked to him the day before he went in for his operation, and he said, "Don't worry, I'll be there." And this is his first time really out, first time traveling, and he's here with us at TED, and I love having you back.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It's great to be here.
You can take over and do the introductions and everything.
Okay, I'm going to do it. This is Janet Baker, who is the head of a company called Dragon Systems, and a very important person, I think, for reasons I will try to discuss. I'd like to first start by saying to Kim that when I tried to turn on the water in my hotel room this morning, I found the user interface was really awful. I couldn't figure out. It was one of those one-handled ones, and there was no blue and red, and I couldn't figure out which was hot or cold. But I'm not a technology elite person, so I guess that's the problem. Because I write about technology, people often ask me, you know, what was the coolest thing you've seen recently, or what was the most important technology development this year? And I was recuperating from some heart surgery for part of the year, and I had some time to think about it. And it's kind of a close call. I mean, experts will disagree. Some people think the most important technological breakthrough of 1997 was when Linda Tripp figured out how to connect a tape recorder and a telephone. And others, you know, equally learned, I think it was when a federal judge in Washington figured out how to uninstall Internet Explorer in 30, 40 seconds. But really didn't uninstall it, it turns out. Never one, those who know me know that I'm often wrong, but never unwilling to state an opinion, and in fact actually get paid to do so. So I will state my opinion on what I think the most important technology breakthrough was, at least for consumers, who after all are the real mass of people for whom we're supposedly doing all this. I think the most important technology breakthrough last year was that in 1997 we finally crossed a line where we got real, inexpensive consumer products that actually could take dictation on a computer and get it mostly right. I think it was a breakthrough of enormous proportions, and it was done in very close proximity by two companies who are represented in this segment of the program. The first company that actually kind of crossed that line and got a product out that really did it was Janet's company, Dragon Systems, a small company in Newton, Massachusetts. Followed, I guess we could get a dispute about the exact number of days, but by roughly 60 days by IBM, a large company also in the Northeast. And what do I mean by that? What I mean is that, I mean, you've heard these predictions for many years. There have been products that could, in some form or another, transcribe or take commands from a person speaking onto a computer. But these products, Dragon Naturally Speaking in the case of Janet's, and IBM Via Voice in the case of IBM's line, actually let you talk in what is called a continuous speech fashion, the way that I'm talking now, without pausing between words, and actually let you speak about most anything. There had been previously some products that worked for doctors, lawyers, specific subgroups. One that I think IBM had, Ozzy, was for radiologists, and it was great, except you had to say tibia a lot, or it didn't work. These products, which cost about $100 now, you can go in the store and buy them, or even less in some versions, let you talk like I'm talking now with very relatively short amount of training and get better accuracy and speed than people who use the Ann Windblad method of typing, and certainly the Walt Mossberg method of typing. And so I'm going to ask Janet to talk for a minute about why this is important, and really, because we are constrained on time. And then for a very quick part of our time here, she's going to call one of her experts from her company up just to give you a little demonstration of what this looks like, because I'm wagering that since, as somebody said, as I guess Ann said, there's some intellectuals here, not everybody may have seen these products. Not everybody actually spends their life looking at all this new software. I thought it would be useful for point of view of both companies and to take a look at it.
Great, thank you. Well, it's a tremendous pleasure to be here today and to have the opportunity of interacting with everyone. Why is speech important anyway, some of you might ask, and the answer is really quite simple, like most questions, in that basically speech is the most efficient and effective way for people to communicate. It is faster than just about anything else you can do. It certainly doesn't satisfy all the means of communication that we need to do, but it is faster and it's preferred by most people. If we had to actually type or write or through gestures or whatever else, communicate with each other without speech, we'd communicate much less. And there's actually some very good hard data on communication modes and the speed of communication for problem solving that a group under Professor Chapanis did some decades ago now at Johns Hopkins, which showed that actually using speech for many problems speeds the problem solution time by a factor of 2 over any and all other communication modes combined. So anyway, so that's why it matters. And, but obviously we know that in order to transfer information, messages, and so forth from one place to another, we need to commit it to text in some form or other typically, and to communicate across time and space. And so many, many years ago, my husband and I, first as graduate students, better than 25 years ago, decided that it was a very important problem that we thought was solvable in our lifetimes. And so we've been working, as have many other people in this field, for that period to try to get to the point where you actually could transform speech into text in real time as you spoke. So that's what it's about. I'd like to introduce to you Joel Gould, who in fact is the principal architect of Dragon Naturally Speaking. And I want you to imagine today that he's not Joel Gould, principal architect for Dragon Naturally Speaking at Dragon, but it's a day in the life of an author, a famous author, who comes into his office and has some things to do. So without further ado, Joel, be my guest.
Computer, computer, wake up. Wrong appliance. Always wanted to do that.
Star Trek 4.
That's right.
Check for new mail. Check for new mail. Check for new mail. Check for new mail. Switch to Microsoft Outlook. Never leave your system off for a long period of time. Check for new mail. Testing. Scratch that. Check for new mail. Open message 1 from Roger. Send an email to Roger Mattis. I am almost done with that article that you want, comma. You will have it tomorrow. File that. Switch to Microsoft Word. A brief history of computer interfaces. New paragraph. In the beginning, there were IBM mainframes, period, and people communicated with their computers by hand coding their information on forms, which were then sent to a punch card pool to be punched, and then fed into the computer, period. New paragraph. And then came personal computers. I said it was a brief history. Scratch that. And then came personal computers with keyboards and DOS, period. And people could enter their information by typing, period. And so some typed, comma, but more communicated with their computers by having their secretaries type, period. New paragraph. And then came Macs and Windows, comma, and people could enter information by clicking on buttons, period. And people could push their own buttons and create really pretty Delete previous two words. Scratch that. Select pretty butt. Pretty presentations to disguise their lack of content, period, new paragraph. And then came Dragon Naturally Speaking, period. And people could talk naturally and continuously to their computers, comma, and their computers would faithfully type whatever they said, period. And people became more productive and more independent, period. And people were happy, period, new paragraph. What does the future hold, question mark, new paragraph? We're still stuck in the world of hieroglyphics, even though we can talk to our computers, period. Soon, comma, however, comma, applications will be redesigned around speech input to become more natural and easy to use, period. And freed from the keyboard, comma, usable computers become smaller, period, new paragraph. And eventually, computers will learn to read my mind. Click cancel. Maybe later, smiley face. Move to top of document. New keynote. Bring this article to Roger at 9 a.m. tomorrow. File that. New keynote. Lunch with Renee at noon tomorrow to plan a party. Scratch that. With Renee at noon tomorrow to plan a party. File that. New keynote. Party at 3 p.m. Friday to celebrate the completion of another great article. File that. Switch to Microsoft Outlook. Show calendar for tomorrow. Well, it won't.
Thank you, Joel.
Okay, thank you.
So Janet, my first question is, why did it make those mistakes that it made?
Well, you know, no technology is perfect, and this one included. And and especially, you know, when you're in a situation, a low-tension situation where people are maybe a little more nervous than they might be otherwise. But indeed, this technology is mostly right. And for most people who don't type
Which we know is good enough in the computer business, right? I mean, that's actually the slogan of some of the bigger companies in the computer business. We're mostly right.
I mean, I think that where this fits today is it's not yet for everybody, but the average office worker types at 30 to 40 words a minute in offices throughout the U.S. And your secretaries, if they're the skilled secretaries, typically don't get a job unless they're typing at least 60 words a minute. Joel readily speaks at 160 words a minute. No, really, we actually know what the speed is. He may not have been speaking that fast now, but it typically is about in that range. We have. I beg your pardon? Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry.
Don't be defensive.
No, but what I was going. The point is that indeed you can create text now faster by talking than anybody can by typing.
All right, let me just look. Some of you who know me, or some of you in this room, have brought me products, and I haven't always liked them. I mean, I'm reasonably skeptical about things. This thing and IBM's product, both, managed, in my personal case, after a couple of weeks of, because one of the things it does is it learns as it goes along, to move faster and with fewer errors that needed corrected. Certainly not with no errors, but with fewer than my crummy typing. I think if you're a brilliant typist, this probably isn't a good substitute. Right. But since most people are not brilliant typists, there is a certain big swath of the population for whom you know, this could be a very interesting way to work on a computer. The question is, are consumers ready to believe that this works?
Well, I think that's a good question. You know, I think that For most of us who have been brought up on Heinlein stories and all kinds of other visions of speech and artificial intelligence and natural language and so forth, this indeed, the reality is different than any of those particular visions. And what this represents today is a productivity tool, and in a way actually gives you some freedom so that you don't have to be in physical contact with your machine while you're creating text. You can sort of walk around and be thinking out loud. It's a good way of capturing rough notes, if you will. But it still isn't for everybody, and typing was invented about 100 years ago and came into the marketplace, and indeed it's an acquired skill for many people who have in fact spent their life keyboarding. Okay, it's not the kind of, like any habit, it's not going to change overnight, and we don't expect it to. Nonetheless, we find that with the advent of continuous speech from the previous discrete speech, that is with pauses between the words as Walt described, immediately in the first month on retail shelves, the volume shot up by more than an order of magnitude. It really satisfies what Andy Groves calls a strategic inflection point. And what we're finding from profiles of users is that, in fact, it cuts a broad swath through what would generally be considered mainstream users. As I say, it's not yet for everybody, but indeed we find that there are not only the doctors and the lawyers, a lot of writers, in fact, people who are doing content creation, children writing school papers, in fact. Kids are not great typists. And we're finding that it doesn't fit the standard profile of an early adopter in the way that we had initially expected.
The numbers are still relatively small. I mean, I hear what you're saying about the composition, but I mean, the average person, even the minority, I know sometimes we think everyone has a computer, but even in the United States, it's still only a minority of households. Those folks, most of them don't know this exists and certainly haven't bought it, and they don't trust all these promises.
Absolutely.
Because they can't even get, Doom to run. I mean, they can't, the software store is one giant broken promise in a lot of cases for people. So that's another slogan we could talk about later. But how are you going to make them believe, or Ozzy at IBM or other companies, which I expect will get on this bandwagon, make them believe that this can really happen? I mean, even if you admit that it will make some mistakes.
Right. I think that happens through at least two primary mechanisms. One is that I do think that most people do need to see it themselves. With all the cinematographic magic that's out there, we've all seen all kinds of effects. We saw some wonderful ones this morning, Metacreations. And so I think that for many people, you do need to see it yourself in order to say, gee, I could do that too, or maybe that's relevant to what I'm doing. And so I think that that's one key aspect. The other thing is that it's through the media, and it's through the kinds of articles that you write, Walt, and that other people
lies. People think the media lie too,
Yeah, well, sometimes it does, but there are people who are more credible than others, and I believe that in fact has a tremendous influence in educating people as to what is and isn't possible. The other way that that Dragon in particular has sought to, if you will, evangelize, is that we have created a lot of tools. Both high-level tools and low-level tools, so that people can speech-enable their applications. We often say that speech by itself has absolutely no value. It's only when it's integrated into an application, such as word processing or your email package. Joel was showing very briefly a new piece of software put out by a company called Actioneer, and they took our tools and in less than a day were able to speech enable all of their applications, so that you could make simple commands like, I'd want to have a meeting with Renee at noon tomorrow, and something like that, and would automatically parse what you say very simply, looking at simple keywords, and then put it into your calendar or set up appointments and what have you. So it's by basically enabling other people to get the value, to make their programs interactive, to create the kind of true multimedia experiences and benefits that we think that we can provide the greatest service and the greatest education to people in getting value from this technology.
What's next? I mean, you've got these programs on the shelf that let you do this, and at least for some people, this will get pretty good after a couple of weeks, and maybe they'll be comfortable using it. But in terms of the next wave, don't people have to rethink the whole way they compose? I mean, you may say that this is faster at laying down the words on the page, and I believe it is, at least in my experience, but I had the odd experience, even as someone who has dictated many news stories over the phone as a hard news reporter over the years, of finding that actually the column that I wrote entirely using this took longer to write because my brain is somehow connected to the keyboard,
Right.
and it had to sort of be rewired to this microphone thing.
Absolutely, and there's
I mean, I know that's a great literate explanation of it, Janet, but can you?
Walt's absolutely right, and the experience that he's had is not unlike the experience I've had myself and lots of other people have reported. If you've always spent a lot of your life either talking to another person or keying in the material yourself, it's a different mode, and it takes some getting used to. But what I found in the beginning is it feels a little strange. You can talk as quietly, in fact, more quietly than you talk on the telephone. So it doesn't have a lot of noise associated with it. But indeed, it's a different mode because although we do talk on telephones and leave voicemail messages when there's nobody else on the other end of the line, okay, you're tending to be doing more expository kinds of things. And the mode that I found that it was most like, and the way that I found it was easy to do, was as if I were explaining something to a colleague. As though there was somebody from the next office who came in and I was just explaining it to them in a very natural way. And that, in fact, that mode works very readily and, in fact, is not difficult to do. But different people will find the experience quite varied, and you'll have to try it yourself and find out.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much.
Janet.